Hey, it's Mandala Studios. Welcome to our video on making a tethered head, part 3 casting. So first of all, we're going to put together the mould that we made in our last video. You can see we've got 3 parts of the mould there, and all I'm doing is I'm going around the edge where the mould parts will seal to the other mould parts and brushing on a relatively thick layer of Vaseline, which will just create a better watertight seal between the 2 parts. We could also put clay over the edges and the inside and the outside to help seal it up as well, but I don't think we did on this. Remember, we did a few bits inside. Clay's better used for that if you've also got some fairly large inconsistencies on your mould walls, which fortunately we don't in this. Everything came together quite well.
For most of our mask moulds, we tend to actually stick the 3 parts together permanently with plaster, but for this, because we're not just putting a thin layer of latex on the inside, we're going to fill it with foam and things as well. We need to be able to take the mould apart in order to get the head out at a later point. So yeah, we can't stick it together forever. We're just doing a temporary Vaseline and strapping.
So yeah, Vaseline's on, then we carefully position all the 3 parts together, making sure the keys all interlock nice and cleanly. You can see that's come together really quite nicely. There's no voids around the neckline. Then we grab a ratchet strap and we just try and bind it up as tight as we can and get it all compressed down hard enough that it will form a good seal, but not so hard as to fracture any of the plaster. It's important to try and put your ratchet strap mechanism in a point where that'll not break it.
So we're going to pour the latex in here. Initially we're going to pour just a small amount in, enough to cover the face, and then we'll swirl the head around, and you'll see me pick it up and turn it around in order to make sure we've got latex in all the ears, we've not got any bubbles under the chin or on the back of the head, we've got a good solid base coat before we fill the thing up. There we are, we're just slushing it around, making sure everything's covered. As Wookie is pouring it in, I'll slowly be tilting the head upright, and again that's to avoid air bubbles under the chin, so you'll see me just rotate the mould as he's pouring.
Yes, that just means that there's no undercut under the chin position. So it just roll up nice and evenly as we go. It's really hard to do because there's a massive drum of latex in the way and it's spilling very slightly. Then once it's up, you just sort of dump it in a corner and leave it there to dwell for an hour. You can see I've just pushed it there. You've seen we've spilt a little bit because the Vaseline wasn't perfect.
Yep.
But that stops after a few seconds or a minute. You can just rub your finger over it and it'll help seal it up.
We normally leave them to dwell for about an hour. In winter it'll be a bit longer, in summer it can be a bit shorter, and then pour off the excess latex. And just pop it back in the drum for the next mask we make.
If you notice, I'm rotating the mask around just to get an extra guarantee of latex all the way around the neckline, so that when we foam fill it, there's nothing to stick to the plaster.
So that's how the latex is dried. We've left it usually probably overnight. In winter it might need a little bit longer. And he's just put some spray glue inside that.
Then we're ripping up some wadding that we're going to stick into the spray glue to help the foam create a mechanical bond with the wadding, so it tends not to lift off the surface of the latex, which it might do if there was no wadding there, because the foam doesn't stick to the latex very well at times. Then we mix up some polyurethane soft foam, DF010 I think. We got that from MB Fiberglass. It's a 2-to-1 soft polyfoam.
2-to-1 by weight?
Yeah.
Cool.
Mix it up. And you note I'm about to get some large pliers because the ISO side crystallises slightly in moisture, including the moisture in the atmosphere, so it's hard to get the lid off occasionally. Pour that in. Then we add a few drops of polyurethane flesh tone pigment and give it a mix using an old mixer.
So I think from memory we were doing this when it was quite warm, which means that it's got a much shorter working life than if it's cooler.
So you pour it in and then we're just going to roll it around on the inside of the mask, trying to coat the outside surfaces as best we can so we can generate a roughly even thickness around the inside of the mask, which is very hard to do because this expands in its own chemical reaction. Once you've done that, just leave it to dry for a few minutes while we mix up the next batch. We need to be careful with this stuff. The isocyanates are not particularly friendly, and by not particularly friendly I mean they're bad for you. Make sure you're doing this in a well-ventilated large workshop with the extractors going and wearing masks as appropriate. I'm in a large room with an extractor and some additional extractors and wearing a mask, I think.
Yep. Although I clearly wasn't wearing a mask when I put my head in there, but I think I was just popping through.
Yeah.
It's one way you will build up an intolerance of it over time. It's not something you want to be working with regularly and breathing in, and it's not something you should be breathing in the fumes from.
Yeah, also make sure you wear gloves. This stuff is horribly sticky and will ruin everything you wear, everything you touch, everything you own. So again, mix that second layer, dump it in and just roll it around. This time we're getting closer up to the neck because we've already filled the crown of the head.
Yep. And doing it in multiple layers will give us a much more even consistency to the foam. We're going to, when we get to the end, add some bits in, because obviously the bottom of your neck, when you cut it off, it's not just smooth foam. So we're going to add some, bits of vertebrae and bits of...
Gorgak.
Yeah. Just to make that look a little bit more interesting.
So we're now mixing up, or getting ready to mix up a third set? Or
I think a fourth. I think we've done 3.
I can't remember.
We've lost count.
You can see inside
Yeah.
there, it's just a bubbly mess inside.
And here's our next one. We're nearly there. We are getting there. So I think this is number 4. I think this is our last one.
Yeah, you'll know I over poured that one, so I had to pour some back and remeasure it. You want to be quite careful with this stuff. It's sensitive to within a few % of tolerance of its mixing things, and if you mix it up to the wrong amounts, it won't set properly, it won't expand properly. Sometimes it'll expand too much, sometimes it'll collapse.
Sometimes it goes weird and grainy.
Yeah, none of these are good.
Yeah.
So make sure you get your mix right. You notice now I'm getting it close to the edge as we're getting onto the neck. Now that's done, we unstrap the ratchet straps and
Pop our mould apart.
carefully start trying to tease the mould apart. It's got to be a little bit careful here because we don't want to damage the pull inside. So we just sort of tease the latex off around the neckline where it's still sticking. Try and find some things into the pry points to lever those apart. Get your fingers inside. We're just trying to create an air gap so that everything's apart, and there you go. The whole thing pops out nicely once it's ready.
Yep. And it should be a little easier to pop the 2 back parts apart.
Just being very careful not to damage the ears. Cleaning off a little bit of the flashing. You see it's minimal flashing because of the Vaseline we put in.
Yep.
Again, just tease that out, and there you go. Thanks very much for watching. Hope you enjoy, and see you next time.